Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self-confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self-doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self-worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. Last episode, we talked about investing in our self-love walk and making peace with things when they don't go as planned. This next topic is so meaty, I've broken it into 2 episodes. In today's segment, we'll take this self-love talk in a new direction as we explore the emotion resentment. Like we discussed last week with perfectionism, resentment is another peace stealer that increases our stress and worry. It also triggers PTSD in many instances. This is why prioritizing self-love is key to protecting our peace of mind and heart. If you ever found yourself trapped in a vicious cycle of resentment, this next episode is for you. I'm so grateful for this safe space to share my own trials and triumphs. I hope you gain some new strategies in these next 2 segments that help you navigate resentment and all the emotions attached to it. And I hope you walk away with renewed confidence and self-esteem to prioritize self-love as you manage these emotional triggers. In today's episode, you'll gain deeper understandings of how resentment is triggered and manifested. You'll hear about how I learned to harness resentment and use it as energy for good, and learn some strategies to manage and minimize the effects of resentment. So today I want to talk to you about resentment, the good, the bad, and the long-term ugly of it. Resentment is an emotion that subtly creeps in after we've processed our primary emotions and internal responses to these. So in short, it's the reaction at the end of a longer chain, a chain with some PTSD links to it. You may be surprised to know that resentment and PTSD can get weaved together in our psyche because they've both deeply rooted themselves in our inner space and both get triggered by past trauma. So what I've learned about resentment is that it's triggered when we feel helpless or treated unfairly or unjustly. At a very basic level, our emotions are layered. They're kind of like an onion. I know I keep using this analogy, but it's the perfect analogy for this. At a basic level, we have primary, secondary, and then tertiary emotions that expose themselves when we repress or don't resolve those initial emotions. Think about what happens when we peel and cut an onion. So those fumes, initially, they start to sting our eyes, maybe burn our nose a little bit, maybe even burn our throat. And, the more we're exposed to that, our eyes will start to tear up. Maybe we'll even start shedding some tears. And it's all really aggravating and uncomfortable. And it kind of sets off a whole bunch of other responses, physical responses to it, or it triggers a lot of our negative emotions that irritate us and upset us. And here we are just trying to cut an onion, right? Just a normal thing, trying to cut an onion. But I want you to think about this onion concept and how the onion triggers our senses when those protective layers are peeled away. So the analogy I want to make here today is to thinking about what triggers our senses when those protective layers are peeled and cut away. So our tertiary emotion, known as resentment, irritates our other senses. It's provoking those ugly inward and outward reactions. So we should probably unpack what the word means literally. It literally means to re-experience a past hurt, trauma, disappointment, or grievance. So for lack of a better term here, resentment is a manifested emotion caused by repressed, suppressed, or unresolved surface emotions. So we think about all those surface emotions that just start to come into play, and often we base our reactions and our behaviors that come forth from those reactions out of those surface layer emotions. But
Resentment is kind of like this thing lurking beneath the surface. So it's like once we crack beneath that surface, then we start to stir up resentment and the emotions that are attached to it. So I'll circle back to this cycle in a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of set a foundation there for that. You can see how this then connects to the PTSD, which is also triggered by our emotional woundedness from past traumatic experiences. I don't just talk about PTSD from past trauma because I've invested years and years of research and coaching and helping others. I too am someone who is compounded by past trauma, and I struggle with PTSD sometimes, as well as resentment. So, in all of my years of researching it and healing from it in its many stages, there are some key factors we must be aware of if we don't want to live in a constant cycle of resentment that easily triggers PTSD and kills our self-esteem. I talk about this in Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free when I break down the trauma triggers and the healing stages that we must go through to heal from grief. And I expand on this also in my forthcoming self-help book, Restore Your Inner Warrior, which kind of connects to this podcast series. So when we look closer at resentment, there's sort of a trifecta cycle at work in our emotional realm. What I mean is that a surface emotion plus another surface emotion often equals or teases out a repressed emotion lurking beneath the surface of the subconscious. So it can be a conscious thing, but what I'm really talking about here right now is this subconscious emotional landscape. I'd like to flip this whole topic on a side today, though, kind of like I did last week when I did a 180 on something. So there's so much talk out there about just being the better person and rising above things. What if rising above doesn't always look like the textbook example? Sometimes our best defense to avoid falling into resentment in the first place is an offensive move to simply match someone's demonstrated behavior. So I know sometimes say people recommend don't match someone's behavior. But sometimes, let's look at this a different way. It might be the exact thing that we do to kind of like preserve our peace and then just quickly move on. So we do not have to rise above everything in the ways that the world tells us to do. There's a lot of messages out there. My own feeds get bombarded with all of these reel after reel of different transformational and motivational speakers giving this kind of same message. And there are plenty of instances where that advice is really helpful, but it's not always the only course of action that we can take. For instance, if you've already put a lot of energy into cultivating a certain type of relationship, and that person continues to remain disinterested in reciprocating the levels of meaningful interaction and commitment that you hope to achieve, number one, you need to believe what they show you, especially when they keep telling you otherwise. So maybe there's those instances where they're telling you, oh, I care about you. Oh, you mean everything to me. Oh, I really want to understand. I really want to be there for you. But then they're showing you that they don't want to understand. They're not trying to be there for you, and all those other things that, go into showing versus telling. And the second thing is, it's okay to stop trapping yourself in a people-pleasing phase. I know so many people who are trapped in that cycle, and it's just so defeating to watch them. And it's easier to see someone else going through it and make a critical assessment of that. But sometimes we don't even recognize that we're falling into that same futile cycle. Stop trapping yourself in a people-pleasing phase where we keep rising above their inaction or clear disinterest because we hope to model the behaviors we want reciprocated. Yeah, obviously, that's a really healthy, regular motive and mode of interacting with others. Model what we hope to see reciprocated, obviously. But I'm talking about those times where you've already kind of put that in, and now you're taking those steps back and you're really kind of assessing like, wait, this is not being reciprocated over a long period of time. So maybe I need to reassess the whole relationship and how I see the relationship and what I will ever possibly be able to get out of this relationship with the current energy that's being, invested into it. So I've recently found myself back in this vicious cycle of this recurrent rejection and lack of resolving old petty grudges. And, at first I could feel all of those emotions on the surface getting stirred awake, and then the resentment starting to set in. And I was thinking about like, I'm just trying to be a better version of myself and practice some of the things that I've been sharing with you each week. And right away I was like, stop. Like, stop and reassess things before you react. And I did 2 things that I've been coaching others to do in similar situations. So this is one of those instances where, there's times where I share things with you that I had these moments where this really worked and I love the way it works. But sometimes we find ourselves still slipping back into those comfortable old bad habits, especially with long-term rooted relationships that we just don't even put a lot of thought into. We just slip into certain patterns of behavior, action, reaction kind of chains of things. And often those patterns of behavior don't lead us to anywhere productive. So here was an instance where I was like, hey, I've been talking a lot about this on the podcast. I'm going to stop myself right now and practice these 2 things. So the first thing is I remained silent until I was wholly ready to respond with my emotions checked. And I talked about this in the last episode, how there's a time to talk right away, and then there's a time to sometimes be silent and to collect yourself and then come back to it and give voice to things after you've processed your emotions. It's okay to respond to dysfunctional and abusive interactions with silence, whether it's short-term or long-term or indefinite. It's okay to respond on your own terms. So coming back to this idea that we have to have healthy boundaries and that we have to preserve these healthy boundaries, we also have to have a plan for how we're going to act and what our character is going to be. And especially when things become challenging or confrontational, we need to go back and remind ourselves, hey, this is the character that I said I was going to be. And then you're reminded of doing things on your terms, which isn't just like, that's my way, but also on the terms that you set for the goals working toward that person that you want to become ultimately. So as time passed on this particular situation, I started to feel resentment creeping in, especially because we were moving through the holidays and I was carrying all this additional emotional baggage, and this kind of like triggered some old past trauma that also centered around the holidays. And, I just was like, it's okay. Don't respond. Keep meditating. Keep taking this to your spiritual meditations. Keep praying about it. Keep asking and seeking for understanding. Just keep working through those emotions. And so that's where I kept myself for a long time. And there was a part of me that kept saying, oh, maybe you've been silent for too long. And I just had to keep reminding myself, you're not staying silent indefinite. You're just working through some things. You're getting your mind wrapped around some things so that when you do break your silence, it is constructive and productive rather than destructive, which is moving in the opposite direction of where I wanted things to go. So the second thing is, I finally did break that silence by writing some things down. I keep talking about this. Sometimes we write things down just to get them out, to keep them in a space. Maybe we revisit that for different reasons. Maybe we share what we write with a mentor or a trusted friend or a therapist. Maybe we just take those things to prayer, or maybe eventually we share the writing with the person that we're trying to work through these emotions with. And so I also want to add one more layer to this concept of writing things down. Writing is a form of talking. And way before these very clipped, short, brief, I only have your attention for a few seconds kind of interactions that we now have with people, people used to write long letters to each other. They didn't see each other all the time. And even if they could pick up the phone and talk to each other, they knew that that might be, cut short or interrupted, and maybe they wouldn't get through all the things that they wanted to say. And so people wrote these very meaningful, in-depth exchanges, and we've kind of fallen away from that. And every once in a while, you'll get a really long note from someone or a really long text from someone, but we don't often mail those things anymore. We might email them to each other, but we don't snail mail them and hold these, long, two-sided, every line filled kind of letters that we used to get from one another. Maybe you've never experienced that, but it's a much different experience to actually read through something that someone took the time and care to share with you and to send to you. And so something that's kind of stood out to me when I teach in higher ed classes, or I actually work with different individuals and clients as a freelance writer, people hire me to help them write emails and write letters. That's one of the services that I offer. And there's this really interesting thing in exchanges that go back and forth. What I've seen lost in the art of letter writing is this kind of like pausing of the emotions to just kind of talking person to person. A lot of times people are still stuck at just getting to the point or making their point, come across. And it almost can feel a little bit abrasive and lacking some of that pathos that we expect, because we have to remember on the other side of every piece of writing that we share is an audience. So we have to always be thinking about how's that audience going to receive what it is that we are putting out there. And so that's kind of a thing. When I talk about meaningfully writing and exchanging letters and the dying art of it, that's the heart of it, what's kind of broken. And of course, without airing out my dirty laundry of my very private interactions with other individuals, I'll just say at a basic level, my response was related to some kind of harsh judgments that were made that were very misinformed. And there was never an invitation or even an acknowledgement in that initial correspondence or exchange that suggested there could possibly be more to the story, that there could possibly be something that I could actually add to help with any type of meaning. And the pattern that in this broken kind of interactions with these individuals is that I'm often not given that. And we just don't talk about things that way. And so there's this chronic pattern of having these very set judgments without having all the information. And to me, in my work of working with communications and helping people give voice to things, it's like very counter to what I normally spend my day trying to do, which is get at the meanings and helping everybody understand so that we don't misjudge and we don't misunderstand each other. So one thing that didn't happen in this exchange is the exchange itself wasn't even acknowledged. And so I really didn't expect to get an acknowledgement or a response yet about this particular note that I sent. I may never get a response, as is kind of a predictable, sad pattern in this relationship. And I had to make peace with that. But I also came to this whole experience as a different person. So I'm not the same person I was in previous interactions in that cycle. I've changed. I've put in the work to try to grow and try to evolve and try to improve myself in different areas and to try to respect when other people are not willing to do the same. So sometimes respect can even just be like, I am just going to give you that space to not do anything because I can't control it anyway, and it's just going to make me very resentful. The thing that was different about me in this exchange was that I now know my value and existence are not determined by anyone's choice to, number one, ignore, reject, or disrespect me, or to withhold love and acceptance. So that's not how love works. That's not how acceptance works. That's not how respect works. And I now know those things. I've done the work to try to understand these things about other people. This is why moments of silence and writing things down are great first-line strategies to use when dealing with your resentment or the emotions attached to them. So you think about, what does this do? Well, first of all, it's protecting our peace and self-esteem. It's a powerful way to preserve our peace. And it's an empowering step to taking authority over our emotional responses while confidently staying true to ourselves. So again, when we say, I don't want to be that person that reacts a specific way or talks a specific way or even thinks a specific way, when someone starts to challenge me or irritate me or whatever, fill in the blank of the emotion, now we can come to this place where we are confidently and boldly staying true to ourselves. And that is like an amazing feeling. I cannot tell you how much that fuels our self-esteem. In the aftermath of my thoughts being ignored, I decided to take another bold step in the particular relationship. So, moving forward, there was another instance for an interaction between us, and I decided to match their example and do the bare minimum in the exact same way that they have engaged with me for ages. So here, previously, I found myself doing all of these things where I was trying to people please and gain approval and be the example, like over and over and over, like show them this is how I want to be treated. This is how I would like to, engage and interact and all these different things. And it wasn't reciprocated for a very long time. I got to this point where I was like, I have to practice what I preach. And sometimes that is just meet people at their level. So when you say like matching someone's energy is, it's a bad move, I think it depends on the situation. Sometimes all we can do to preserve our peace and not stir up all these emotions is to just meet someone at their level. And that level might be like so low bar level that it's almost touching the ground, and that's okay. So in this case, I kind of feel like that's what it was, but that's what I did. And what this did for me by just doing this is it removed that moment of resentment because I didn't do the thing hoping to get the same reciprocated. So right there, boom, I said, well, I'm not going to do that thing, so I have no expectations that they're going to try to reciprocate it. I just met them at their level, the thing that they're already always doing. Is that where I want my meaningful relationships to land? No, but right now, these individuals are not looking for a meaningful relationship with me. So I have to just make peace with that as well. But the other thing that this allowed me to do is stop playing along and pretending that things are okay between us when we do have to interact beyond how we interacted. And aside from that, I also didn't have to hear the harsh, often misguided judgments without being given a chance to offer clarity and context. So by minimizing the interaction, I protected myself by not putting myself in a situation to begin with where I might get those harsh judgments without an invitation to actually try to understand each other. So I kept myself in that protected space, which, let me tell you, felt really good. After I worked through some of my disappointment, it felt good to say, I didn't have to go through all of that. Because sometimes the anxiousness of anticipating what you know is going to come out of it can also steal our peace in a different way. And it can also fuel resentment in a different way as well. So I took my power back in this instance, and I realized that no amount of people-pleasing or rising above had historically led to a healthier, functional relationship. So again, not just making peace with something, but recognizing, making something make sense to yourself sometimes is also really helpful. And I made peace with the fact that I cannot control them or the situations that bring us together. What I can control is my trifecta emotional responses. This whole cycle of events and altered interactions helped me minimize my resentment in some of the ways that I mentioned above, but it also helped me because I removed myself from the futile cycle of rising above only to have my energy met by minimal transactional interactions. It's hard for us to feel resentment in this scenario. And we really do tap into an incredible power source when we allow ourselves to process our emotions and finally release them, whether we write or talk about them, and then hold our peace. That's right, we have to hold on to it. It's sacred. These are all self-love practices that help us protect and maintain our peace of mind and heart, helping to minimize and even eliminate resentment. This then works like a superfood source for our self-esteem and confidence. Next week, we'll dive deeper into how harboring resentment leads to unhealthy reactions that fuel our desire for revenge or lead into misunderstandings where we become estranged or self-isolated. Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. If you haven't already, consider joining my Facebook group of women just like you, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood. Here's a safe space to get tips,
share stories, and find community support. And if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. As you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Saturday. Ciao.